Hello and welcome to Brockley News, the programme that keeps you up to date with all that's going on in and around the hospital. My name's Laver, and today we'll be looking back at the recent Research and Innovation Day held in the Charles Lack Theatre right here at the RNOH. Later I'll be talking to the team from Create, a joint venture between the RNOH, UCL and Aspire, who are conducting transitional research into spinal injuries. We will also be hearing from the RNOH Chief Exec, Rob Hurd, for the need for patient participation in clinical trials. But first, I began the day by speaking to R&I manager, Hauptmanova. We're in the Charles Lack Theatre, and it's the second of the annual Research Day events. I'm here with Hauptmanova, who's the head of the R&D. Busy day ahead?
It certainly is going to be a very busy day ahead. A long time planning, but always a few things are bound to go amiss. But we're looking forward to our second annual Research Day, and hopefully it will be a success.
I notice you've done some rebranding since the last Research and Development Day. It's now RIC, which is Research
and Innovation Centre. I think we've tried to portray ourselves in a slightly different picture for various historical reasons. Many of the NHS R&D offices are perceived as quite bureaucratic. They're not really engaged in terms of the recruitment of patients and developing new projects. So we wanted the title to be more reflective of the work that we actually do, because we incorporate the people who helped with the project development, people who help with the governance side of things, but we also incorporate the recruitment team, so the nurses and the coordinators who go out there and help to recruit patients into all the studies.
In terms of your day-to-day work, what are you personally responsible for?
Nowadays, suddenly the department has grown so much, so it's obviously quite a lot of day-to-day in terms of people management. But the sort of things that we would be doing on day-to-day when we're starting, we would be discussing some basic ideas and trying to find ways how to help people develop it, refer them to the right people externally, maybe point them to the right people internally who are working on something similar, then helping them to actually find the right funder, then put the application together, which is always a lot of last-minute efforts putting things together. And then once they have the funding, actually helping people put together the regulatory submission, because all research that takes place needs to have Research Ethics Committee approval and many more approvals depending on what sort of research it is. If we're working with commercial companies, obviously we're sorting out all the financial and the contractual aspects. And then sometimes I get involved in some of the issues with the recruitment of patients as well. So quite never a day the same.
No, I can imagine. So really, you're really the support office, aren't you, behind any research that goes on here at the RNOH?
As you say, we are a support department. We want to help people to develop ideas, do it in the right way, making sure that it has the benefit for our patients in the end.
Okay, well, look, I'll let you get on. You're obviously very busy. Hope it turns out to be a good day.
Thank you.
I've just managed to get hold of Rob Hurd, who's the Chief Executive Officer here at the RNOH. We stepped outside from the meeting going on inside. Rob, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. And it's good to see Radio Brockley here at our Research Day, which is a major day that we have every year now in partnership with University College London. Obviously, the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital is not just a hospital. It is more than that. It's an academic centre, and it's involved in education, research, and training of staff as well. So, generally, the hospital's in good shape. We're still planning for our rebuild, and the building's going up next year. And we want our academic partners shoulder to shoulder on that. University College London building an academic centre as well, so this Research Day is pretty important in that. And what we would want is having as many of our patients as possible going through research trials, because at the end of the day the long-term benefit for patients in general from innovation, from new ways of doing things, doing trials. I mean, this is somewhere we can actually do proper trials on whether surgery is of benefit. It's not just assumed that to have an operation it makes you better. So compared to a standard hospital, we have wonderful opportunities here as an academic centre, wonderful clinicians, doctors, allied health professionals, nurses who are contributing to that. And that approach here makes us special. And we're the place where innovation can take place, where research can take place, and that can translate into better treatment for patients.
I'm actually doing some work at the moment with Eva around the clinical research with patients. It's something we're trying to put together, which hopefully will get that message back out to the patients in the ward that might be interested in that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's feeling they want to give something back, if they want to help us in our journey, help patients in the future, get involved in some of those trials, I encourage them to sign up, ask their clinician, ask the people around them how can they get involved in research as they come through the NHS generally, and at the RNOH, particularly on our orthopaedic trials and musculoskeletal trials we have here.
Do you find it's difficult to get patients to sign up for that?
Of course, people are nervous about it, and particularly maybe nervous about what's called randomised trials, where you're potentially putting different treatment options against each other, and you're not necessarily selecting that form of treatment. But the whole issue is you're going through. It's ethically approved. There's no evidence that one route is better than the other. You're contributing to that process of getting the evidence that will benefit patients in the future. The counter argument of just accepting a treatment that somebody tells you that isn't evidence based and not doing it in that way, it's counterintuitive, and I think I can understand the nervousness, but I'd also feel a lot of people want to give something back. They want, as well as going through their treatment, are we learning out of their treatment? And people always say to me, if they're giving feedback or they're involved in research, they'd want to know that is of some benefit. We're learning from that, as well as what they're getting out of it for their individual clinical care.
Yeah, I guess on the plus side, the patients we speak to and ex-patients are all very complimentary and actually say, yes, we'd like to do something to help. So
indeed, and that's great, and we'd really want to encourage people to do that as much as possible and sign up to trials through the course of their treatment.
Okay, just one final question. I believe there's a dedication when we go back in after lunch. Can you tell me something about that?
Yes, Professor Mike Craggs, one of our professors here from UCL, who's been employed by the Trust for many years. He's been here for over 20 years and has basically been fundamental to the Functional Assessment Restoration Service support to the Spinal Cord Injury Centre here, involved in much research which has improved the lot of spinal cord injury patients and how they're able to function and reintegrate into a more normal lifestyle. I'm about to pay a dedication to Mike, and I thank him through you as well. Recognise Mike's contribution to both the hospital, the patients, the Spinal Cord Injury Centre, and the Functional Assessment Restoration Service.
Thanks very much for your time. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks very much.
A reminder that you're listening to Brockley News from the hospital radio service of the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital in Stanmore. Following us tonight at 8:30, it's Bedside Bingo with our very own Dave Rauch, and then at 9 p.m. it's the Sunday Request Show with Keith Reeve. But right now it's time to go back to the recent Research and Innovation Day, where I was fortunate enough to be able to talk to Dr. Rui Loureiro and a number of his team who are working on some very interesting research. Tell me something about the CREATE team and what it means.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks for the invitation to talk to you today. Yes, the Aspire CREATE is the Centre for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assisted Technology. It's a new centre, a new collaboration between the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital, the Aspire charity, and UCL, which was established about a year ago to conduct cutting-edge research and translational research into spinal cord injuries. So, although I mentioned spinal cord injuries, our research is actually translational, so applies to other populations such as strokes, other brain injuries, muscle dystrophy, and the aging population in general.
You mentioned they're translational. Can you put that in layman's terms for me, what that means?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the techniques that we have developed for strokes, say, in terms of therapies to help someone had a stroke to relearn how to use their arm and hand again, apply, for instance, to incomplete spinal cord injuries, where as a result of the injury they still have some level of movement, but not enough to, for instance, carry out tasks such as making a cup of tea.
Okay, so you're looking at medical techniques that come from other areas that could be useful and perhaps haven't been thought of to be used with spinal cord injuries up to now.
Absolutely. So it's not only about developing the technologies per se, but we are very much interested in learning how the brain works, how the messages the brain sends to the muscles for movement to happen are generated, and how we can, by understanding these processes, so the information that the brain sends and the response that the brain receives can be then used and to develop better assistive devices and better rehabilitation therapies.
You're based here at the RNOH, but you teach at the UCL, University College London?
Yes, currently there are 5 academics in our centre, engineers and scientists by trade, but we teach what we preach, so to speak. So we are actually running both undergraduate and postgrad courses taught here at the Stanmore campus, and what is unique about the teaching we do is most of this teaching is done with the clinicians. So it's a very unique environment, if I might say, because not only the professionals of the future are actually learning techniques, but they are exposed not only to the research but to the clinical practice, and how the research informs the clinical practice, and how the results obtained from the delivery of those clinical services influence the research and advance the research.
And I guess so that the postgraduates, do they move into this area and perhaps join the team or get involved with the RNH?
That's one of the things we hope will happen more and more in the future for definitely, and that's certainly one of the objectives of UCL. The partnership between UCL and the RNOH is not only to develop the cutting edge research that we are currently working on, but to obviously educate the next generation to be research minded and to use research as a way of improving clinical practice.
Okay, you're called the CREATE team, with a CREATE with a little e at the end there. Can you just tell me what that stands for?
Nothing specific. Actually, CREATE stands for the Centre for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology. So the E in the end is related to technology.
Technology. What about the projects you've got running at the moment? Can you give me an idea of some of the things that are going on right now?
Certainly. Our projects, currently we have 5 are currently running with the hospital, so collaborations with the hospital, and 5 have been applied for with the hospital. So projects range from biomechanics of shoulder, biomechanics of the femoral joints, all the way to understanding how the descending pathways from the brain are processed within spinal cord injuries, to development of smart wheelchairs, which will allow a more transparent use of those devices in everyday life, to neuromodulation of signals, say for instance muscle activity, brain activity, to advanced implant technologies, advanced wheelchairs, which we can measure forces exerted on the push rims that can then inform us of the issues to do with the biomechanics of the shoulder and so on and so forth. And this is work that is my colleague Stephen Taylor is having. It's a project called the Sense Wheel, which I'm sure he will be happy to talk to you about. We have a new project called iCycle, which involves colleagues across campus, involves clinicians, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, as well as scientists within UCL, and all the way down to understanding. So it's a project, a potential project we're waiting for to hear from, is understanding how people with spinal cord injuries, once they are discharged from hospital, trying to understand how they move in their home environments and how being released to an environment which has been modified to allow them to live with this the spinal injury, actually the importance of that environment as opposed to an environment which has not been modified. So we are particularly interested in trying to understand the issues of readmissions, because this hospital was absolutely amazing work when it comes to rehabilitation of spinal cord injuries. And you see a very nice recovery line, and all of a sudden those patients are discharged from hospital, and we see patients coming back to hospital, and we want to minimize those risks, spot the early warning signs so we can provide a better integrative service in the community.
Okay, thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated.
I've now got Dr. Steve Taylor with me. What's the research that you're involved in?
Right, thanks, Ron. So my work over the years I've been at UCL has majored on the measurement of forces in implants. So these are the loads that are carried by everybody, you and I, every day, particularly during activity. And why are these important? Well, they're important because they determine things like, if you had an implant replacement, how long would it last? Would it remain fixed in the bone? And how much worse would this be if you did activity, or particularly dangerous activities? So to put this in context, the point is that in the lower limb, we've got levels of force acting about the hip and the knee joints of around 1/4 ton. And of course, during jogging and things like that, it can get even worse.
In terms of spinal cord injuries, then what's the advantage of the work you're doing in that respect?
In that respect, this work is quite fundamental because it leads into applications like implant design and testing, how to rehabilitate patients after joint replacement, and also in terms of validating mathematical models. So none of those have particular immediate application to spinal cord injury. However, the project that you've just mentioned, SenseWheel, does have particular application because, of course, this is for wheelchair-bound people. This is a measurement of the forces that are applied by the subject to the wheelchair through the push rim and how efficient they are in terms of propelling the wheelchair.
All right.
So when you propel a wheelchair, there's only a certain type of force which is useful, and the rest is wasted force. We want to know how efficiently people push their wheelchairs, and particularly how they can be trained at a young age to do that. So we're planning to work with a wheelchair charity to train particularly young wheelchair users after spinal cord injury how to propel their wheelchair.
And how do you actually measure the forces?
It's not rocket science. These are little load cells. They're force measuring transducers which are attached between the push rim and the wheel of the wheelchair. And what we're working on currently is a wireless version of that. So everything's contained within the wheel, within the load cell, and there's no wires, nothing to get broken. So the emphasis is on reliability, and we want to make this as plug and play as possible.
So presumably up to now the work you've been doing is in the lab. This new version of the SenseWheel will allow you to take it out on the street and test in real environments.
Absolutely, yes. One of the key features of this project really is to enable wheelchair users to have confidence in going places they probably didn't do before. And to do that, they need to know the difficulty level encountered in going from A to B. And so there's going to be an extension of this project which involves mapping the terrain and the forces encountered by a wheelchair user over different terrains.
Right.
And that will eventually build up a database allowing people to be confident of going to a certain location.
So, effect, for want of a better example, they'll be able to go on a sort of Google Earth type
Yes.
program and say, how difficult is it for me to get into the National Theatre or
Yes,
whatever?
that would be one aim of this, and I think that's obviously a few years away.
Yeah,
But we're building the technology now that would enable them to do that.
that's great. Sounds very interesting work, and again, something that will be very important in the future. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Got another member of the CREATE team here. It's Dr. Tom Carlson. Tom, tell me, what's the work you're involved in?
Okay, so I'm a roboticist, and I'm working a lot with assistive technology, particularly wheelchairs and exoskeletons, looking at mobility and how we can interact with these devices and how we can control them.
So in terms of practical results for wheelchair users, people with spinal cord injuries, what are the practical outcomes of that you're hoping for?
Okay, so at the moment, if you look at a wide range of different input devices like SIP and puff switches, standard joysticks, head arrays, scanning inputs, lots of them have difficulties and shortcomings using these different interfaces. So we're looking to see how the wheelchairs and the exoskeletons themselves can actually understand what the user's trying to do and help them when the interface is actually not very good at conveying that information across.
Right. Tell me what, in my ignorance, what an exoskeleton is.
Okay, so an exoskeleton is like a skeleton that goes on the outside of your body, the exoskeleton. And we're starting to see these to support both lower limbs and upper limbs. The idea there is that if you've got some paralysed limb, the exoskeleton itself can help you to move that joint. So examples, we're working with different companies that produce these lower limb exoskeletons. We're looking at how to control them in a natural way.
And is this are exoskeletons a new development, or have they been around a while?
So the new development is actually seeing exoskeletons that are becoming commercially available, that are powered and somehow self-supporting, supporting your weight. We've seen passive devices around for a long time. Typically, splints and orthoses can be considered a sort of exoskeleton.
And how is the research going so far? Are you getting any positive results, or are you still in an early stage?
So these are very early stages. We're a new team here. We've only been around about a year, but we're working very closely with other departments inside the RNOH, particularly with the Spinal Cord Injury Centre, but also other units. And we're starting to work with patients and things gradually. So
that's good. Okay, thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm talking to Lindsay Duffel now. Lindsay, tell me something about the work you do here at CREATE.
So my work is focused on looking at the effectiveness of different rehabilitation techniques to improve function for people after they've had a spinal cord injury.
I saw your presentation earlier, and if I understand what you were saying, you're suggesting that, that there's a neurological effect that, if it's stimulated enough, can almost build regrowth in terms of muscle control?
Yeah, so what we know is that when you have a spinal cord injury, the spinal cord itself can't naturally regenerate. But often with a spinal cord injury, we don't get a complete sever of the cord. So we have some tracts that remain intact. It's just that, it's perhaps quite small and there are perhaps not so many messages going down there. So what our therapies might be able to do is to modify other parts of the central nervous system, like in the brain, that allow those messages to be kind of rerouted down those pathways that do remain in the spinal cord. So the therapies that we're creating, we're using different techniques to try to understand if these changes are happening in the brain, which might suggest that we are successfully changing the conditions in the nervous system that will allow them to regain some control over the lower limbs.
I know one of the things you are looking at is a thing called the eye cycle that they've developed here. Tell me something about the eye cycle and how it's used and how that relates to your work.
Yeah, so the eye cycle uses something called functional electrical stimulation, and that's normally shortened to FES, and that's quite popular and has been used for many years for spinal cord injury rehab. And while it's been quite successful at improving health after spinal cord injury, it's not shown so many effects in terms of improving function. And one of the beliefs is that because the electrical stimulation activates the muscles, but there's no involvement with the brain. So we're not getting these effects that I was just talking about, where we're seeing these actual changes in the central nervous system. So what the iCycle has is this FES plus a voluntary component. So we use a commercially available software that provides a virtual reality environment for cycling. So the individual can actually see themselves cycling on a screen, so an animation, and they can race against other cyclists, or they can race against themselves from a previous trial, and that gives them a motivation to involve some voluntary drive into the rehabilitation, which might promote these changes in a level of the brain, which might in turn improve the function and those messages passing from the brain to the muscles.
So the cycle is driven mechanically, but you're suggesting maybe that there's signs there that some of what they're learning can be retained. The voluntary side, as you said, which is encouraged by them racing against themselves or each other's like on a game simulator.
Exactly. So the good thing about the iCycle is when you do voluntarily contribute. So the people that we're testing and people that have spinal cord injuries have different levels of damage. So some people do have some remaining function, and that's what we're trying to tap into. So what's really good about the iCycle is that the FES will assist, so there'll be a motor turning the legs. The FES will create some muscle activity, but the only way that the cyclist on the screen is going to go faster is if they do it themselves, if they voluntarily contribute. So it gives them some feedback of the fact that they're doing the right things to make their muscles contract, even if it's just a little bit, because they're going to see that cyclist going faster on the screen.
And has that given you some positive results so far?
So we're in the sort of setup stages. So we've had a few teething problems so far, but yeah, we're people definitely like it. It allows the user to remain in their wheelchair to do the exercise, which makes it very easy for people to use. And yeah, we've actually been finding that the patients are stronger than we expected, so we're having to make the motor a bit stronger because they seem to be able to beat the motor at the moment.
Sounds like that could have some really interesting results and impact in the future.
Yes, I hope so.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
you.
Okay, at the end of the day now, and I'm back with Eva Hauptmanova. How's it gone today, Eva?
I think it went quite well. It's always a worry on a day like this, as we don't register people, so we don't know is hundreds going to turn up or nobody. We've had a really good series of talks covering wide variety. We've had some nursing talks, we have some of our surgeons giving talks, and really covering quite a wide scope of the sort of projects that are happening within the hospital, and also how we collaborate with UCL.
Do people from outside the hospital come to these occasions?
We tend to invite quite a few people from outside the hospital. Obviously, we've had quite a few of the people from UCL that we work with attending and also giving some of the talks. The Division of Surgery Director was in attendance today. We're quite pleased with that, and there were some external people as well who we've invited. I'm about to go and review our sign-in sheet as to who turned up on the day, but we invite pretty much anybody who is interested.
You've got another day coming up fairly soon, the 20th of May.
Yes, on the 20th of May is a slightly different day. 20th of May is celebrated internationally as the Clinical Trials Day. It's the anniversary of the first ever randomized controlled trial done. And the day is now used as a sort of a day to promote the importance of clinical research for patients and the public. So we're going to be running a 2-hour event in Charles Luck Theatre again. This time, rather than having a series of talks, we're going to be bringing down some of our fancy equipment and inviting people to come and try it out, show them how we use it, and just learn a bit more about how they can get involved.
Is that aimed at patients and members of the public from outside the hospital?
Yes, so we are inviting patients, we inviting members of the public, as well as obviously hospital staff who want to learn a bit more about what goes on here. But it's important that we raise our profile and that patients and the public understand what sort of work we do and how important it is to the running of the hospital.
That sounds good. Okay, well, we'll maybe join you on that day and see how it goes.
You definitely should. It's going to be great fun, and we're going to have some great equipment to test out and play with. I'm sure most people will enjoy that.
Okay, thanks very much for your time and congratulations on today again.
Thank you.